let's continue our lecture with the final topic, which is the models of relationships between science and religion. So, the relation between science and religion is the subject of continued debate in philosophy and theology. To what extent are religion and science compatible? Are religious beliefs sometimes conducive to science, or do they inevitably pose obstacles to scientific inquiry? So the interdisciplinary field of science and religion, also called theology and science, aims to answer all of these questions and some other questions. So Ian Haber come up with the models of relationships between science and religion. And if you look at the study of science and religion, there are numbers of models that explain the relationship between science and religion. But in this lecture, we are focusing on what Ian Haber has come up with, which referring to the conflict model, the independence model, the integration model, as well as the dialogue model. Let's start with the conflict model. So basically in this model, the name says it all, the conflict model. Conflict, which means they are continuously incompatible, fundamentally opposite to each other. And is this in this model, the assumption is if science is right, the religion is wrong, or vice versa. If religion is right, the science is wrong. Um, so and the classic examples are the Galileo Galilei clash with the church over the heliocentric theory. If you remember in the introduction, in the class of history and philosophy of science, we learned about the Copernican revolution, um, where Copernicus introduced heliocentric um, heliocentric concept where the sun is the center of the earth. um, um, sun is the center of the universe, whereas the previous concept that the previous paradigm that has been established and accepted by the society during that time or the previous time was earth is the center of the universe. So Galileo Galilei somehow supported this heliocentric model, sun is the center of the universe, which ended up him being getting into trial, and all of his work has been banned. He actually provided evidence showing that um, provided scientific evidence, which is the tides, as well as the comet. When the comet passed through the sky. So he actually do the calculation and showed his observation, but somehow the church um, claim and accuse him that he is going against what the Christian teaching. So he ended up with a sentence of, I couldn't think of the word, but basically he was grounded until the end of his life. So that is a classic example of the conflict model. So the church is going against what Galileo Galilei has proposed, because of the different paradigm. So, but later, because of the scientific revolution, Galileo Galilei and Copernicus um, concept of heliocentric has been accepted. Another exemplar example is the church supposed opposition to Darwinian evolution. um, you know, um, in the church or in the Christian teaching, um, the origin of life is the God's creature, the first God creature, which is Adam and Eve. So it is absolute from God. God set the rules, but if in what Darwin has suggested is because of based on the theory of evolution is that Abe is the origin of life. So hence the question of morality and men set the rules. I think this just sharing you my experience having receiving education, tertiary education in the Western background, especially wearing hijab, being a um, female Muslim, sitting at the front of the class whenever the subject of evolution came up. the lecturer will look into my eyes and saying, regardless what your religion is, you have to believe that the evolution occurred. I was like, okay, are you imposing these science on my religion? So I don't think that really occur in Malaysia. Imposing what science against religions, but um, that sort of discussion or discourse is quite prominent in Western culture. Next is a study by sociologist Elaine Eklund, interviewed about basically academic from 21 research universities in the US. Even though we say that um, conflict model saying that religion and science are usually always in conflict, they are always in opposite of each other, but based on this survey it showed that about 50% say they are always against each other, while 50% say they're never against each other, they're never in conflict with each other. About 70% says that they sometimes in conflict with each other. So basically this extreme um, model, which is like always in conflict, is not being shared by not everyone. So yeah, so now we can look at another model, which is the NOMA or independence model. This independence model is introduced by Stephen Jay Gould in his book Rock of Ages. So he maintained that science and religion operate within separate compartments, addressing quite different kind of question. Therefore, can be no conflict between them virtually by definition. Um, the independence model that science and religion, um, this independence model holds that science and religion explore separate domains that ask distinct questions. So the lack of conflicts between science and religion arise from a lack of overlap between their respective domains or professional expertise. So in addition, Gould held that science deal with matter of facts, whereas religion address question of ethics, value, and purpose. In a short argument is that science and religion do indeed ask rather different questions of question about the world, hence there's no overlap, they are independent of each other. Next is the dialogue model. This is this definition, which is this model maintains that science and religion are addressing the same reality from different perspectives. So, but providing explanations that are not in any kind of rivalry to each other, but rather are complementary. So when you talk about dialogue, you are like talking to each other, okay? Which means you are not fighting against each other, so you are complementary. So this model proposed a mutualistic relationship between religion and science, and it also assumes that there is common ground between both fields, perhaps in the presupposition methods and concept. Like I said, it's saying that they are in dialogue, they can discuss, they can sit. People in science and people in religion can sit in the same table and talk without fighting, and they are not competing each other, and they are using different perspective, talking about the same thing but different perspective, and as well they are complementary to each other. So that's um, dialogue model. And the final model is the integration model. So you can see that in the picture, science and religion are overlapping, which is different than what we saw in the independence model as well as in the what was this now? The dialogue model. So um, this integration model, I don't know why it's suddenly so big font there. So this model talk about more extensive in its unification of science and theology. So it's like integration between unification between these two agencies. So religious, cosmological, and metaphysical ideas provide a context of justification for the scientific study of the nature of the order of nature. Basically, religion influence scientific endeavor, and science tell us about God. Taking an example of um, the Islamic teaching, the first revelation is read, which means the first revelation is Iqra. The first revelation of Quran means to read or asking you to read. Iqra as an instruction, read. So because of that, it empowers Muslim civilization during their golden age to read, to go further the knowledge, and also support the scientific inquisition. So that's one of the reason why uh, the scientific advancement and development was rigorously happening during the Muslim civilization compared to the Roman or the Greek civilization, because the Greek civilization was the science development was more abstract. It was more about thinking and philosophy rather than doing something hands-on, because they have different classes. People who do hands-on stuff are considered as low classes, whereas people who do thinking are people who are who are high class. So these people who are high class do thinking, do scientific inquisition just based on mind. But in Islamic civilization, they don't have classes. The teaching us not to have classes, so you just whoever and everyone should go and read, and everyone should seek for knowledge. So that's an integration model. So science, religions. So that's an example how religions influence the science and the law. This is similar what I've just told you. So the Quran, the case of golden age of Islamic sciences, the Quran, Islamic sacred text, contains an elaborate cosmology, makes regular references to natural phenomena, and and implores its reader to ponder the world of nature as God science. God science in Arabic means ayatullah, ayah Allah. And if I'm not mistaken, no, this is not. If I'm not mistaken, it was. This is in Quran uh, uh, the what happened in the womb was explained way before um, the study on obstetric and gynecology occurred. So somehow once it has been proven by science, it's complementary of what has been explained in the Quran 100 years before science has proved that. So that's an example of integration model. I believe that every religion has their own integration model between science and the religion. So it's up for you to go and discover about it. That's basically what we should be covering in this lecture. I shall see you in 5:40 on the lecture of science and technology in Malaysia. That's all from me. Thank you.